You ever notice how people act when your name slips into a room before you do? It's fascinating. Suddenly everyone starts whispering, leaning in, tightening their voices like they're discussing a dangerous secret. They don't say it out loud, of course not, they never do. But you can feel it, this tension, this strange electricity twisting in the air, because somewhere, out of sight, a serious fight is happening about you. Not with fists and blood, no, something messier. People wrestling with their own fears, their own guilt, their own memories of the way they treated you. They're arguing about who you've become, about who gets to stand beside you now, about who lost the right to even say your name. Funny, isn't it? You didn't ask for any of this. You didn't demand loyalty, didn't beg for recognition. You just survived. You just kept moving. And survival has a way of turning into a battlefield when people realize they no longer have access to the version of you they once underestimated. They're fighting because your rise exposed their intentions, their insecurities, their masks. And now they're scrambling, desperate to claim a story they didn't help you write, desperate to keep their place in a life they thought would always be easy to walk in and out of. But things aren't so simple now, are they? Your growth came with a price, and the bill is being paid in the shadows by everyone who didn't believe you'd make it this far. People argue the loudest when they realize they misjudged your worth. It's almost poetic, in a twisted sort of way, how people suddenly grow passionate, emotional, even protective, when the person they once ignored starts glowing in places they never expected. They don't yell because they care. They yell because reality finally slapped them hard enough to bruise. They yell because somewhere deep inside, there's this uncomfortable truth clawing at their pride. They had you in their hands once, and they didn't realize what they were holding. They treated you like an extra piece in their little game, something replaceable, something ordinary. And now that you've stepped into your own voice, your own strength, your own transformation, well, now they're losing their minds about it. Funny how quiet they were when you needed them. How uninterested they were when you were stretching yourself thin just to prove you were worthy of attention. Back then, they couldn't be bothered. Back then, you were just background noise to their spotlight. But now they're raising their voices at each other, debating your value like you're some artifact they freshly discovered. They're scrambling to rewrite history, to make themselves look like they saw your potential from the beginning. But they didn't, not even close. Their arguments are nothing but guilt wearing the mask of concern. They shout not because they're fighting for you, but because they're fighting the realization that they misread you completely, and now they have to deal with the consequences of that blindness. There's a certain madness in watching people panic over a truth they tried so hard to ignore. They didn't want to believe you were capable of rising without their assistance. They laughed at your efforts, rolled their eyes at your dreams, dismissed your growth as temporary. But something about you didn't break the way they expected. Something about you kept going. And when someone survives the storms designed to drown them, it has a way of shaking the ground under the feet of those who underestimated them. So now they're stumbling, arguing, pointing fingers, blaming each other for not appreciating you earlier. Deep down, they know the truth. They all played their part in overlooking you. They raise their voices because silence terrifies them now. Your silence especially. They try to figure out when you stopped caring about their opinions, when you stopped waiting for their approval, when you stopped centering your choices around their comfort. They never noticed that shift when it happened. Oh no. They only noticed when the consequences crashed into their little bubble. They talk loudly because they're trying to drown out the fear whispering inside their skulls. The fear that they lost you. The fear that you're outgrowing them. The fear that they don't matter to you the way you once mattered to them. Fear makes people loud. Fear makes people foolish. Fear makes people fight. And isn't it amusing how they all suddenly have an opinion about your life now? One says you're acting different. Another says you're becoming better. Another claims you're being influenced by someone new. They throw theories around like confetti because accepting the truth would shatter whatever pride they have left. The truth being that you changed because you had to. Because staying small for their comfort was killing you slowly. Because the only way to breathe again was to stop needing people who only showed up when it was convenient for them. They misjudged you. And now they're paying the price with confusion and chaos. They swing their words like weapons at each other, each trying to prove they understood you best, each trying to claim they were there for you, even when you remember the silence, the neglect, the empty promises. And while they're busy arguing, you stand there watching, knowing none of their noise changes who you've become. They're not fighting for you. They're fighting their own shame. They're fighting the ghost of the version of you they took for granted. They're fighting because they want to erase the fact that you slipped out of their control the moment you discovered your own worth. They once saw you as small, forgettable, replaceable. Now they see you as something they can't afford to lose, something they can't easily explain, something that forces them to confront the lies they told themselves. That's why the fight is loud. That's why the tension is thick. That's why their words crack under pressure. Because when people misjudge someone who eventually rises, they don't just lose a person. They lose the illusion of superiority they hid behind. They lose the comfort of believing you needed them more than they needed you. They lose the story in which they were the important ones, and nothing sparks conflict. Quite like losing a story where you were the hero and realizing the real story was never about you at all. Your growth exposes who wanted you weak and who wanted you winning. It's strange how people reveal their true colors without even realizing it. All you have to do is start rising, not dramatically, not with fireworks, just quietly, steadily, in a way. That shows you're no longer willing to play small for their comfort. And suddenly the world shifts. People you thought were cheering for you start twitching. People you barely noticed start watching. People who once dismissed you now study you like a threat. Because growth has this beautiful, cruel way of peeling back the masks everyone wears. It doesn't matter what they said before. The truth shows in how they react when you stand up straighter than they remember. You'll notice the ones who always applauded your struggles but grew silent at your progress. They liked you better when you were unsure, when you were predictable, when you were clinging to their words like they were oxygen. They liked you vulnerable because it made them feel significant. As long as you stayed beneath them, their world made sense. They could advise you, correct you, pity you, control you. But the moment you stop needing their permission to shine, they start coughing on their own envy. They don't clap anymore. They don't congratulate you. They bring up your past mistakes, your flaws, your insecurities. They try to drag you back into the version of yourself that made them comfortable. Those are the ones who wanted you weak. Then there are the ones who always smiled when you failed, but only because your failure confirmed their superiority. They liked being the successful one in your dynamic. They loved the role of the inspirational figure, the one you looked up to, the one who got to feel important. But now that you're leveling up, growing sharper, faster, more confident, they feel their grip slipping. They realize they're no longer the center of your orbit. They feel threatened by the possibility that you might surpass them. And nothing terrifies a small mind more than the thought of someone they underestimated rising above them. That's when the passive-aggressive comments start. The subtle insults disguised as jokes, the just trying to help remarks dripping with insecurity. They wanted you weak because your weakness protected their ego. But there's another group, a quieter one, the one you never really noticed before. These are the people who smile for real, who don't flinch when you succeed, who don't feel smaller just because you're becoming bigger. They don't compete with you because they're too busy growing themselves. They don't resent your progress because they know progress isn't a limited resource. They don't cling to your old version because they actually like who you're becoming. These are the ones who wanted you winning. They're rare, almost suspiciously rare. Which is why their sincerity stands out like a flickering neon sign in a dim alley. They like the strong version of you because they weren't intimidated by it. They understood that your rise didn't mean their fall. They support you without hidden motives, without envy, without fear, and your growth exposes them just as clearly as it exposes the others. You see, the moment you grow, you stop fitting into the boxes people built for you. And that terrifies the ones who love boxes. It threatens those who loved being above you. It disrupts those who depended on your limitation. But growth doesn't care about their comfort. It keeps moving, and as you move, you'll notice something else. People start fighting, not physically, not openly, but their expressions, their tone, their sudden urge to compare themselves to you. They fight their own panic. They fight their own regret. They fight the fact that you're proving them wrong without saying a single word. Your growth becomes a mirror they long to break because it reflects everything they didn't become, everything they didn't expect you to be. Some will try to sabotage you. Some will try to claim credit for your transformation. Some will try to guilt you for changing. But every attempt reveals the truth. They preferred you weak. They thrived when you doubted yourself. They were loyal only as long as you stayed beneath their ceiling. Your growth wasn't supposed to go this far. In their minds, you were supposed to stay small enough to depend on them, insecure enough to accept their scraps, predictable enough to remain manageable. When you outgrow their expectations, they call you arrogant. When you break their limits, they call you ungrateful. When you stop shrinking, they call you different. They don't realize that's the whole point. And yet the ones who wanted you winning, they don't fight, they don't guilt, they don't cling. They just keep walking beside you the same way they did when you had nothing. Because your rise doesn't shake them. It inspires them. It strengthens them. And if you pay attention, you'll notice something very simple. The ones who want you weak fall away as your path rises, but the ones who wanted you winning rise with you step by step, without fear, without envy, without hesitations. From you creates conflict in those who depended on your confusion. It's almost amusing, isn't it, how some people function only when you're unsure of yourself. When you were stumbling, doubting, second-guessing everything you said, they felt powerful. They felt necessary. They felt like the experts of your life. The authority over your choices, the gatekeepers of your confidence. As long as you were confused, they had a role, they had relevance, they had a reason to exist in your story. But the moment you went quiet, not the silence of defeat, but the silence of clarity, they started panicking in ways they won't admit. They feel the shift before they understand it. And nothing terrifies someone more than losing control of a person they thought they had completely figured out. Your silence disrupts them. It interrupts the script they rehearsed about you. You used to explain every emotion, every thought, every mistake like you owed them an explanation. You used to overshare, hoping they'd finally understand you. You used to justify yourself, trying to fix relationships that were never meant to be saved. But now you don't explain, you don't justify, you don't offer anything. You respond with quiet, and that quiet is louder than any argument you ever had. They can't stand it. They need the noise. They need the old version of you who pleaded to be understood. They need the chaos of your confusion because that's where their influence lived. When you were lost, they felt found. When you questioned yourself, they felt certain. When you handed them your doubts, they used them as weapons. But silence is dangerous. Silence is clarity. Silence means you stop playing their game, and clarity steals the foundation from those who built their comfort on your insecurity. Now they sit in their rooms, replaying conversations, trying to locate where you slipped out of their grip. They read your messages twice, 3 times, overanalyzing every blank space. They stare at the phone like it owes them an explanation for your calm. They're irritated, confused, restless. They want you to go back to the version of yourself that needed them, because without you, confusion, they have nothing to correct, nothing to fix, nothing to feel superior about. Your silence forces them to face themselves, and some people can't handle their own reflection without using someone else's weakness as a distraction. They start whispering about you. They start asking others if you've changed. They start telling stories that make them sound like victims of your growth. They twist your quiet into arrogance, your stillness into disrespect, your peace into distance. They do anything at all to avoid admitting the truth. You finally understand your worth, and now they don't know where they fit. They depended on your chaos because it kept them comfortable. Your uncertainty made them feel intelligent. Your emotional storms made them feel stable. But now the storm is gone, and they're left with the unsettling calm of someone who finally sees through their intentions. And that's when the conflict begins. Not with you. You're quiet, watching, detached. The conflict happens inside them. They fight themselves. One part of them wants to reach out, pretend everything is normal, pull you back into old patterns. Another part feels threatened, afraid that your silence means you've outgrown them. Another part feels guilty, realizing they only supported you when you were struggling. They go back and forth, wrestling with their own conscience, but they never admit it. They'd rather blame your transformation than face their own dependence on your confusion. You taught them who they were by becoming someone they can't manipulate anymore. Silence exposes people. It shows who respected you and who only respected their ability to influence you. When you spoke too much, they felt comfortable. When you poured your heart out, they felt in control. But when you closed the door, when you stopped explaining yourself, when you reclaimed your inner world, they lost their grip. And losing control feels like betrayal to those who only loved you when you were lost. They start arguments behind your back, debates in their minds, scenarios in their imagination, all because they can't understand how you moved on without announcing it. Some will reach out pretending they care. Some will accuse you of acting different. Some will stay silent but watch you obsessively, waiting for cracks. But the conflict inside them grows louder every day you remain calm. They depended on your confusion for their identity. Now your silence dismantles them from the inside out. And the beautiful part is, you didn't do anything except choose peace over chaos, clarity over noise, self-respect over begging to be understood. Your silence did what your explanations never could. It forced them to confront the truth they never wanted to see. They needed your confusion more than they ever needed you. They fight because you became someone they can't control anymore. That's the real reason behind all the tension, the sudden arguments, the sharp little whispers floating around your name. It's not love. It's not concern. It's not loyalty. It's control. The loss of it. The fear of it. The absolute terror of watching someone evolve beyond the reach of their influence. People don't panic because you change. They panic because they can't change you back. They can't shove you into the same box you once lived in. They can't predict your reactions, can't read your expressions, can't twist your emotions into their own advantage. You've become unpredictable, and unpredictable people are the most dangerous to those who depend on having power over you. They remember the older version of you, the softer one, the quieter one, the one who apologized for things that weren't your fault just to keep the peace. They remember how easy you were to guilt, how quickly you bent yourself to please them, how you believed every criticism they threw at you. They miss that you. Oh, they miss that version more than they'll ever admit. Because that version made their world convenient. That version kept them comfortable. That version gave them control dressed up as concern. But that version is gone, and what replaced it is someone they never trained for. Someone who sees through their tricks, catches their manipulations, doesn't fall for their emotional traps. Someone who now knows the difference between attention and respect. Someone who knows better. They fight now because the new you is a threat. A threat to the image they created of themselves. A threat to the power they thought they held. A threat to the narrative where they were always the wise one, the strong one, the stable one. Your growth ruins their script. It exposes their strategies. It reveals how much they relied on your insecurity to feel important. And losing that dynamic feels like losing oxygen to people who survived on control. They scramble. They throw accusations, guilt trips, dramatic sighs, subtle insults. They try to make you feel guilty for your strength, as if you're betraying them by becoming someone who doesn't bow to their pressure anymore. They call you distant, cold, ungrateful. They say you've changed in a way they don't recognize. They twist your evolution into disrespect. They paint your boundary as insults. They act like your independence is a personal attack. And the funny thing is, they actually believe their own lies. They genuinely believe they're the victims in your story. Control does that to people. It blinds them. It convinces them they are owed the version of you that made their lives easier. They're not fighting you. They're fighting the reality that you're no longer manageable. Watch their eyes when you refuse to react, when you don't take the bait. When their manipulation rolls off you like dust instead of sinking into your skin. That look, part confusion, part frustration, part fear. That's what losing control feels like. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't respond the way they expect. They poke, they prod, they push, hoping the old you will return. But you don't. And that terrifies them more than anything. The arguments happening behind your back, the sudden interest in your life, obsessive checking, the debates, they all come from one place: desperation. Desperate people don't think clearly. They don't act logically. They lash out, sometimes loudly, sometimes silently. But it all comes down to the same truth. They never cared about you as much as they cared about controlling the version of you that benefited them. You removed yourself from the old dynamic, and now they're left wrestling with their own reflection. They can't blame you anymore, can't manipulate you anymore, can't predict your reactions anymore. And when people can't control you, they try to control the story about you. They twist your strength into selfishness, your growth into rebellion, your boundaries into cruelty. They try to turn others against you because they think if they can't control you directly, maybe they can control the way you're perceived. But the most satisfying part comes from knowing none of it works. You've outgrown the mechanisms they used to operate on. You've outgrown the emotional traps they set. You've outgrown the version of yourself who once believed their approval was essential. Now you move with a freedom they can't chain down. And that freedom is exactly why they're fighting. Not because you did something wrong, but because you did something they never expected you learned to live without their permission. And people who can't control you will always fear you, always argue about you, always fight over you. Because deep down they know the truth. You were never theirs to control in the first place. You ever notice how people only start fighting over something after they realize its value? They walk past it 100 times, ignore it, laugh at it, brush it aside like dust on a jacket, until someone else bends down, picks it up, and says, "Oh, this is worth something." And suddenly the whole world wakes up like they've been slapped across the face. That's the funny thing about worth. Nobody sees it until someone else does. And right now, whether you believe it or not, there's a storm brewing. Because the thing they overlooked, underestimated, mocked, dismissed, stepped over, stepped on, talked down to, and wrote off just happened to be you. Now they're scrambling around in panic, trying to figure out how they missed the obvious. It's amusing, really. People spend so much time pretending to be clever, but they're always late to their own realization. And the moment they realize they were wrong about you, that's when the fight begins. Oh, not the polite kind. Not the please allow me kind. No, this is the kind where teeth clench, voices rise, and everyone starts pointing fingers, blaming each other, blaming fate, blaming the universe for letting you slip through their hands. They'll say they always believed in you. They'll swear they spotted your potential long before anyone else. They'll rewrite every memory, every moment, every conversation in their minds just to avoid admitting the truth. They never thought you'd become someone others would want. They never thought you'd grow sharp enough to demand respect. They never thought you'd grow strong enough to walk away. But now there's a fight, an ugly, quiet, backstage fight about who gets to claim you, who gets to approach you, who gets to stand next to you, who gets to pretend they were part of your story from the start. And you might think that's flattering. You might think that's justice. But the real comedy is how fast people switch roles when the spotlight shifts. The same ones who told you to lower your voice, shrink your dreams, stay in your lane, are now wrestling behind closed doors asking, who let them get this far? As if you needed their permission to rise. The truth is, people aren't fighting because they care about you. They're fighting because they fear what you becoming valuable means for them. They're not afraid of your glow. They're afraid of their dimness. They're not afraid of your strength. They're afraid of how weak they looked when they tried to break you. They're not afraid of your success. They're afraid of your memory because some part of them knows you remember every laugh, every doubt, every door they closed in your face. And now they're terrified you'll return the favor. But here's the fascinating part. The louder the fight about you becomes, the quieter you should be. Let them argue. Let them claw at each other. Let them reveal their motives, their insecurities, their desperation. Because the moment people start fighting over you, you've already won. You don't need to throw a punch when chaos swings on your behalf. You don't need to lift a finger when the world is busy revealing how much they misjudged you. There's a certain power in letting others fight for a place you once begged for. A power in watching them scramble for access to the very space they insisted you didn't deserve. And don't misunderstand, this fight isn't temporary. Oh no, it's only just beginning. Because once people see value, once they see potential, once they see momentum. They cling to it like it's their lifeline, not because they want to support you, but because they want to be seen standing next to you when your rise becomes undeniable. They want the association, the credit, the proximity to something burning bright. They want to claim you before anyone else does, because losing you now means admitting that they lost something priceless long before they even knew it was in their hands. And pride is the most fragile thing. Once it cracks, people will do anything to glue it back together, even if it means fighting over the very person they once ignored. They're fighting because your success exposes their mistakes. They're fighting because your elevation proves their judgment was flawed. They're fighting because your growth makes their stagnation impossible to hide. And they're fighting because somewhere deep in their anxious little minds, they know they can't control what you become anymore. That's the real reason the fight is so serious. It's not about you being chosen. It's about them realizing they couldn't stop it. Even if they tried, people always assume that when people start fighting over you, it must mean they suddenly love you, appreciate you, value you. That's the sweet little lie you're supposed to swallow. But the truth is far more amusing, far more twisted, far more predictable. They're not fighting because they care about you. They're fighting because they care about what having access to you does for them. You see, people treat value the way they treat fire. They want to stay close enough to feel warm, but not so close that they get burned. But when that fire becomes rare, when it becomes something only a few can touch, suddenly everyone wants to be the chosen one. Not for your sake, for theirs. They want the power of saying, they picked me. They want the comfort of being connected to something rising, something moving, something changing, something they couldn't produce on their own. And it's funny, isn't it, how the same people who once doubted you now argue about who should have supported you first. They rewrite the past like it's clay in their hands. Suddenly, every cold shoulder becomes a misunderstood moment. Every dismissive word becomes tough love. Every time they brushed you aside becomes something noble, something strategic, something they meant to do. They're desperate to paint themselves as your early believers because being late to your worth makes them look foolish. And people will do anything to avoid looking foolish, especially in front of others. So they fight, not because they want you, but because they want the story that comes with you. They want to be able to say, I knew them before all this. They want that backstage pass to your transformation so they can pretend they helped build it. They want the illusion of importance. They want the image of loyalty without ever having paid its price. They want the benefits of standing beside you without ever having stood behind you. And if someone else gets too close, if someone else takes the role they wish they had, well, suddenly that becomes a threat. A threat to their ego, their image, their status. A threat to the little fantasy they've created in their minds where you owe them something. So the fight begins not over you, but over the version of you they want to claim. And what's even more entertaining is how quietly this fight happens. Not in the open. No. In whispers, in private conversations, in subtle digs, in competitive compliments, in sneaky little moves meant to sabotage each other while pretending to support you. People will smile while sharpening knives behind the curtain. They'll clap for you while tugging someone else down. They'll praise you while plotting how to stay closest to your spotlight. It's a beautiful chaos, really, because it reveals something people try so hard to hide, their need to feel relevant, their hunger for a connection to anything that looks like growth, their panic at the idea of being left behind. And whether you notice it or not, you become the trophy, not a person, not a soul, not a story. A trophy, a shiny symbol they want on their shelf because it says something about them. Being next to you makes them feel bigger. Being chosen by you makes them feel superior. Being associated with you makes them feel like they've somehow won, even though they never played the game. And the moment they realize losing you means losing that feeling, they get desperate. That desperation is the spark. It starts small, like a flicker of envy. Then it grows into insecurity. Then into panic, then into this frantic, almost comical battle, where everyone wants to speak on your behalf, act on your behalf, decide what's best for you, as if you suddenly became incapable of thinking for yourself. They don't want you to choose. They want to choose for you. Because if you choose, they might lose. And losing you, losing access, losing importance, terrifies them more than they will ever admit. And once that fear sets in, they start doing things they once swore they'd never do. They break their dignified posture. They betray their polished persona. They reveal the cracks in their confidence. They stop pretending to be calm and start scrambling for your attention like children fighting over a toy. Because deep down, that's what this whole thing is, a childish competition dressed up in adult clothes, a desperate attempt to claim what they never nurtured, a fight for proximity to value they never believed in until someone else did. They're not fighting for you, they're fighting for what you represent, for the reflection of themselves they hope to see when they stand close to you, for the version of their story that sounds better when your name is in it, for the illusion of influence, control, relevance, for the comfort of telling themselves they still matter in your world, even though they didn't matter in your rise. You know what fascinates me the most? The way people suddenly start observing you like you're some unpredictable creature the moment they sense tension around your name. They tilt their heads, narrow their eyes, whisper to each other. What's going on with them? As if they're studying a rare animal at the edge of a cage that's starting to bend. They don't know what's happening, but they can smell it, this strange, electric shift in the air, this invisible friction, this quiet uproar. And when people don't understand something, they get nervous. They start inventing explanations, stories, assumptions, anything to soothe the little tremor of fear crawling up their spine. Because nothing scares people more than losing control of a narrative they thought they owned. And you become the center of that nervousness, the eye of the storm. They can feel something swirling, circling, tightening around your presence. They see people acting differently around you, speaking softer, watching you with more caution, more awareness, more interest. And suddenly, everyone wants to know why. What changed? Why now? What makes you so important? They can feel the seriousness of the fight happening behind the scenes, even if they can't see it. That's what bothers them, the not knowing. People hate being left out of the truth, especially when the truth has your name on it. So they start watching you more closely, not with admiration, with suspicion, with curiosity that feels almost invasive. They examine everything you do, how you walk into a room, how you look at people, how you carry yourself now. They're searching for clues, signs, cracks, anything that might reveal why there's this sudden shift in the atmosphere. They don't understand that the battle happening about you isn't loud. It isn't public. It's quiet, strategic, boiling beneath the surface, where only the players involved can feel the heat. But the smoke always leaks out. And that smoke exposes something unsettling, that you're no longer predictable. You're no longer small enough to control, no longer safe enough to dismiss, no longer weak enough to overlook. And unpredictability makes people uncomfortable because it forces them to reevaluate their position. They used to know exactly where you stood. They used to believe they had you figured out. They used to think you were easy to replace, easy to ignore, easy to label. But now they don't know what you're capable of. Now they don't know where your power comes from. Now they don't know who's protecting you, supporting you, fighting for you behind the scenes. And uncertainty, my friend, is the breeding ground of fear. Fear changes how people behave, twists them. It makes them kinder on the surface, but sharper underneath. They begin to tread lightly around you, speaking in careful tones, offering fake smiles that don't reach their eyes. They ask questions they never cared about before. They try to check in, pretend they're on your side, pretend they always cared about your well-being. But the truth is obvious. They're not checking on you. They're checking on the situation, on the danger level, on the possibility that the fight happening about you might eventually involve them. And when people realize someone is being fought over, they start choosing sides, even if the fight was never theirs to begin with. They talk among themselves, weighing risks, trying to figure out which stance benefits them the most. support you, distance themselves, play neutral, pretend they never underestimated you. They perform emotional gymnastics trying to protect their own image. They want to appear supportive without actually taking responsibility. They want to appear loyal without having lifted a finger for you before. They want the benefits of being close to you without the consequences of being wrong about you in the past. But underneath all those polite gestures and suddenly warm smiles, there's something darker simmering. Resentment, not because you did anything wrong, but because your growth exposes them. Because your value shining now makes their blindness before feel unforgivable. Because the fight happening about you reminds them they never fought for you. And that guilt, that discomfort, that bruised pride, oh, it eats at them. So they watch you with a mixture of fascination and bitterness, trying to figure out how someone they once dismissed became someone others now argue over. And deep down, they're afraid of what that means for them. Because if people are fighting over you now, it means you've become a force. It means you matter. It means you're no longer accessible at their convenience. It means they can't treat you the same way they used to, and that terrifies them, because it means they have to change their behavior or risk being left out of the new world forming around you. They're scared because they don't know which version of you they're dealing with anymore. The one they thought they could control, or the one rising from the chaos they never saw coming. You ever notice how life has this twisted sense of humor? You're wandering around, minding your own chaos, thinking everything is random, accidental, meaningless noise, and then there it is. That same person again, the same face, the same pull, the same inconvenient spark you tried to ignore the first time. And just when you convince yourself it's nothing, that you're imagining it, that you can slip away unnoticed, something bigger pushes the moment back in front of you, like a hand tapping your shoulder, whispering, "Look closer, you missed something." And you feel that strange shift in your chest, the kind that doesn't ask for permission, the kind that doesn't care if you're ready or not. Suddenly the world feels staged, like the pieces were placed on purpose, like someone's been dropping hints in the dark, pointing at one person with a grin that says, "Yes, this one." And no matter how much you fight it, no matter how loudly your fear tries to drown it out, the truth keeps circling back, pressing against your mind, insisting that there's a reason you can shake them, a reason they keep reappearing in the middle of your beautiful little chaos. Repeated signs aren't coincidences. They demand recognition, but people love pretending otherwise. They hide behind logic, routines, and excuses, telling themselves everything is random, everything is accidental, everything is just noise in a crowded world. But deep down, everyone knows when something keeps circling back, it's not random, it's intentional, it's deliberate, it's a message disguised as repetition, slipping through the cracks of denial. You see the same person again, feel the same pull again, run into the same moment again, and you tell yourself it's nothing. You laugh it off, you brush it aside, you try to convince your mind that patterns don't mean anything. But patterns are the language of the universe, the only way it speaks without using a single word. And the universe does not repeat itself for fun. It repeats itself to get your attention. People pretend they're not paying attention, but they are. Oh, they are. Their heart stutters for a second, their breath catches, their mind jolts awake like a startled animal. But admitting that a sign feels like a sign, no, that would require honesty. And honesty is a luxury most people can't afford. Because honesty leads to responsibility, and responsibility leads to action, and action, well, action forces you to face the fact that something bigger than you is nudging you towards someone. It forces you to confront the possibility that your life isn't as random as you pretend it is. And that thought terrifies people more than chaos itself. The signs start small, a passing thought, a familiar glance, a coincidence that feels too precise. You shove it aside because acknowledging it feels like stepping into a story you didn't plan on participating in. But the signs don't care about your plans. They don't care about your comfort or your fear. They keep returning, pushing, pressing, circling your awareness like a quiet whisper that becomes louder each time you ignore it. You can dismiss the first sign, maybe even the second, but by the third, you start feeling that uncomfortable pressure in your chest, that little voice saying, "You know this means something." You feel it even if you pretend otherwise. And when the same person keeps showing up through circumstances too specific, too ironic, too precise, you start sensing something bigger at play. You start noticing how your thoughts drift to them, how your attention sharpens when their presence enters the scene, how the world feels strangely aligned whenever they appear. People call it intuition, fate, timing, destiny. You can dress it up however you want. But the truth is simpler. The signs are pointing somewhere, and you're either too afraid or too stubborn to admit it. But fear doesn't erase truth, and stubbornness doesn't cancel purpose. The signs don't stop just because you're uncomfortable. Repetition is the universe's way of smacking you in the face gently. If you ignore it, the signs get louder. If you resist, they become undeniable. Because when something matters, when someone matters, when a connection is written into the fabric of your life, the universe doesn't trust you to notice the first time. It repeats and repeats and repeats until the message becomes impossible to ignore. People cling to convenience, so the universe uses persistence. People cling to excuses, so the universe uses precision. People cling to fear, so the universe uses familiarity, a familiar face, a familiar feeling, a familiar moment that echoes louder every time it returns. And that's the thing about signs. They don't ask for permission. They don't wait for you to be ready. They don't soften themselves just because you're too scared to admit they mean something. They simply appear again and again with a kind of eerie confidence, like they already know you'll eventually see what you're trying so hard not to acknowledge. The signs don't want your comfort, they want your awareness. They want you to notice the truth you keep running from. They want you to wake up. Most people spend their lives waiting for something obvious, some dramatic revelation, some grand event that spells out meaning in flashing lights. But life rarely works that way. It doesn't shout, it hints, it nudges, it whispers, it circles, it repeats, and only the ones paying attention understand that the repeated signs are the loudest message of all. They're telling you something important, something deliberate, something that keeps pointing to one person, because the connection is not random, not accidental, not replaceable. And once you feel that truth settling into your bones, once you recognize that repetition isn't chaos but intention, everything changes. Not because the signs become clearer, but because you finally admit what they've been trying to tell you all along. Certain connections return because they were meant to, and everyone knows it, even if they pretend not to. People love pretending everything is disposable, temporary, replaceable. Relationships, moments, emotions, all treated like cheap props in a play they barely understand. But then there's that one connection, that one person, the one presence that refuses to fade no matter how much distance you create or how deeply you bury the memory. You try to shake them off, laugh it off, explain it away, but life doesn't let you escape that easily. Not when it's deliberate, not when it's scripted with precision, not when their role in your story isn't finished yet. They show up again unexpectedly. Maybe in a moment you weren't prepared for, maybe in a place you didn't expect, maybe in a thought that creeps in at the worst possible time. And every time they return, there's this eerie familiarity, like the universe is placing the same puzzle piece in your hands over and over, waiting for you to stop pretending you don't see where it fits. Most people don't like that. They get scared. They want things clean, controlled, predictable. But real connections don't care about your control. They have their own gravity, their own timing, their own agenda. And what's funny is how people try to convince themselves that the return is accidental. They blame coincidence, algorithms, timing, anything but the truth, Because admitting meaning requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires courage, and courage, well, courage isn't exactly humanity's strong suit. So they minimize it, laugh at it, run from it, but the connection comes back anyway. It always comes back, like a shadow you can't outrun, like an echo you can't silence, like a reminder that knows exactly where your weak spot is. There's a reason it pulls at you, a reason it unsettles you, a reason it refuses to dissolve like everything else. Some people arrive to shake you awake, tear down your illusions, and reroute the entire direction of your mind. They carry something familiar, something sharp, something timeless. And the moment you meet them, even if you don't understand it, something in you shifts. It might feel like curiosity, fear, chaos, recognition. It doesn't matter. What matters is that it sticks. It roots itself. And even if you try to ignore it, the connection waits. The return is the proof, because life doesn't waste energy bringing back anything meaningless. If someone keeps reappearing, slipping through the cracks of your routine, resurfacing in the moments you thought you'd moved on, there's a reason. And not some small sentimental reason, no, something bigger. Something woven into your path before you even noticed it. Something that tugs at your instincts in ways logic can't touch. People try to silence that instinct, but instincts don't vanish. They simmer, they watch, they wait for the moment when denial cracks, and denial always cracks. The connection returns again, maybe through a conversation, a memory, a Drea, a sudden thought that enters your mind with the force of a storm, and the more you resist it, the heavier it gets. That's the thing about what's meant for you. It doesn't politely knock and then leave when you don't answer. It stays at the door. It rattles the handle. It slips under the frame. It pushes its way into your awareness until you can't pretend you didn't see it. Because you did. You always did. People think meant to be sounds romantic, but it's not. It's raw. It's uncomfortable. It's terrifying. It forces introspection. It drags hidden emotions to the surface. It rearranges your priorities without permission. And no matter how much you try to maintain the illusion of control, the connection pulls you back in. Not because you're weak, but because some bonds are wired into your story in ways you can't sabotage, outrun, or rewrite. They're part of your design. And what's even more unsettling is that the connection doesn't just return externally. It returns inside you. You feel it in the pit of your stomach, the back of your mind, the strange tightening in your chest when their name crosses your thoughts. That's not coincidence. That's not random firing of neurons. That's recognition, familiarity. Truth resurfacing from beneath layers of fear and excuses. Some connections return because they never left in the first place. They were dormant, waiting for timing, waiting for clarity, waiting for you to finally look past your fear. Once you realize that, once you feel that deeper pull that doesn't care about distance, silence, or time, you stop asking why they keep coming back. You start asking why you ever thought they wouldn't. People say timing is everything, but they forget how unpredictable timing can be. They imagine life as this neat little calendar with perfect slots for perfect moments, neatly labeled, color-coded, manageable. But real timing, the kind that actually matters, doesn't ask for your permission. It doesn't follow your plans. It doesn't wait politely while you get your life in order. No, real timing is chaotic. It strikes when you're distracted, unprepared, off balance. It loves catching you with your guard down. It loves making you question everything you thought you had under control. And that's exactly how it works when someone is meant to cross your path again. The timing always feels strange, too soon, too late, too intense, too sudden. It'll never be convenient. It'll never be simple. It'll never be the way you rehearsed it in your mind. It arrives like a glitch in the system, a tiny disruption that grows and grows until you can't ignore it anymore. That's when most people panic. They want life to follow rules, they want connections to follow schedules, they want their emotions to show up at predictable hours like well-trained pets. But timing has a twisted sense of humor, and when it brings someone back around, it's rarely because you're ready. It's because you're meant to face something. It creeps in quietly at first. A message, a memory, a feeling, a sign you can't explain. You brush it off, tell yourself it's nothing, but then it returns, louder, clearer, more deliberate. The timing tightens like a noose around your old excuses, and that's when you start realizing that maybe, just maybe, this isn't random, because life doesn't repeat a moment unless there's something in it you still haven't understood. People underestimate the precision of timing. They think chaos means disorder, but some chaos is engineered with surgical accuracy, like when two paths cross at the exact second both people need it, even if neither wants to admit it. The timing exposes your hidden fears. It pokes at your unresolved feelings. It forces you to confront the part of yourself you've been avoiding. That's why a moment feels so inconvenient. It's not meant to be comfortable. It's meant to shake you awake. You try to resist it. You tell yourself it's the wrong moment, the wrong phase, the wrong circumstances. But the timing laughs at your logic, because every time you declare yourself not ready, that's exactly when the universe drops the person right back into your orbit. Not to punish you, not to tease you, but to align something deep, something inevitable. Something that won't happen if you're too busy pretending you don't feel the pull. And the timing keeps tightening. The more you ignore it, the more obvious it becomes. You notice patterns. You notice coincidences that don't feel like coincidences. You notice how their presence, even the thought of their presence, hits you differently now. Stronger, sharper, more real. Like the timing finally clicked into place, even if the rest of your life hasn't. That's the trick. Everything else can be messy, broken, chaotic, but the connection itself arrives with clarity, crystal clarity, unavoidable clarity. People don't like that kind of clarity. It exposes too much. It shows them who they're drawn to and why. It shows them the truth they tried to bury under routines, distractions, and temporary replacements. And when the timing aligns again, all those flimsy distractions crumble like cheap cardboard. Because the real thing stands out. It always stands out. It's the only thing that feels alive. The timing is a test, not of patience, not of loyalty, but of honesty. It asks you if you're willing to stop lying to yourself. It asks whether you're brave enough to acknowledge a connection that has survived distance, silence, fear, and your own attempts to destroy it. Most people fail that test. Not because they don't care, but because caring terrifies them. Timing doesn't care about that terror. It brings the moment in you. And when it comes, you feel it in your voice, in your pulse, in the way your thoughts shift without warning. There's a tension, a pull, a familiar pressure, like something inside you knows exactly what this moment means, even if your mind is scrambling for excuses. The timing exposes the truth you've been orbiting around for far too long. It doesn't ask for acceptance. It demands recognition. Because when someone reappears at a moment that feels impossibly specific, impossibly pointed, impossibly charged, it's never just timing for the sake of timing. It's timing with intention, timing with purpose, timing that refuses to be ignored. People always assume that when life brings someone back to them, it's because everything is supposed to be warm and sweet and sentimental. They think it's some kind of poetic reunion, like two puzzle pieces finally clicking together with a soft little, "Ah, yes, this makes sense." But life isn't that gentle. Life isn't that tidy. When someone is pulled back into your world, especially after distance or silence or confusion, it's rarely because everything is peaceful. More often, it's because something underneath the surface has started to tremble, something that refuses to stay buried, something you've tried to ignore, silence, or outgrow, but it keeps breaking through the cracks like a stubborn voice you can't quite mute. And that thing is connection. Not the polite, convenient, manageable type. I'm talking about the kind that gnaws at you. The kind that lingers even when you pretend it doesn't. The kind that keeps showing up in small signs, repeating patterns, familiar glances you can't forget. The kind that doesn't care about your pride, your plans, or your carefully crafted emotional armor. It claws its way back into your awareness because it has unfinished business. It's a thread that never snapped, even when it stretched thin. A pull that never fully let go, even when both of you tried to walk in opposite directions. Most people don't want to admit they feel this. They'd rather call it coincidence. They'd rather label it nostalgia. They'd rather tell themselves it's just habit or weakness or a trick of memory. But deep down, deep down, they know better. They know when someone has a place in their life that nobody else has managed to fill. They know when a bond refuses to fade the way it logically should. They know when someone's presence, whether physical or distant, shakes something in them that nothing else does. And when that person reappears, or their name resurfaces, or their energy circles back into your world, your heart reacts before your brain has time to protest. That reaction is the truth, but truth is inconvenient. Truth is dangerous. Truth disrupts routines, and people love their routines more than they love clarity, so they bury it. They try to suffocate it under distractions, responsibilities, and half-hearted attachments. But this kind of connection, it has a pulse of its own, a wild, unpredictable pulse. It wakes up when it wants to. It whispers when you try to silence it. It drags you back to memories you pretended didn't matter. And when life sends this person near you again, physically or emotionally, it triggers that pulse like a spark hitting dry gasoline. That spark isn't random. It's not meaningless. It's not accidental. It's the universe nudging you, shaking you, reminding you that some connections are carved deeper than your logic wants them to be. You don't choose them. You don't schedule them. You don't control them. They simply exist, rooted in something beyond your reasoning. And when that person comes back around, even for a moment, the feeling hits you with uncomfortable clarity. This isn't over. This never actually ended. You just covered it with noise. ND hoped it would shut up, but it won't. And what's even funnier is how this connection exposes your most guarded parts. The parts you hide from everyone else. The parts you pretend you don't have. With them, walls crack, masks loosen. The image you try so hard to maintain becomes irrelevant. You become raw, unfiltered, flawed, real. They see the version of you that slips through the cracks when your guard is down, and somehow they don't flinch, they don't run, they understand it. Maybe because they carry the same fractures. Maybe because their soul recognizes the disorder in yours. That's what makes this connection so dangerous. Not because it's toxic or dramatic, but because it's honest, truly honest. And honesty is terrifying, especially when it comes from another human being who mirrors your own depth, your wounds, your longing, your chaos. You don't get many people like that. Most are surface-level chapters, a few are footnotes. But some, rare, unsettling, unforgettable, are entire volumes you never finished reading. And when one of those people shows up again, the air shifts. Something inside you wakes up, stretching like it's been asleep for years. You feel the old electricity, the old familiarity, the old intensity. But it's not old at all, is it? Because the connection didn't fade, it just went quiet, waiting for the right moment to stir again, waiting for a window when both of you would feel the pull more sharply, more unmistakably, more truthfully. So the moment they reappear, everything inside you recognizes them before your mind catches up. like your soul leans forward a little, like it whispers, you again. People crave comfort like it's oxygen. They cling to easy paths, predictable routines, and safe little emotional hideouts because the unknown terrifies them more than any monster under the bed ever could. And when a connection starts to test them, really test them, they panic, they run, they hide behind excuses, masks, and carefully rehearsed lines about timing or circumstances, or how they're just not ready. As if readiness is something life waits for, as if the universe sits there politely tapping its foot, saying, "Oh sure, take your time, I'll bring this person back when you feel brave." No, life doesn't work that way. When someone is meant to challenge your comfort, they appear right when you'd rather stay asleep, right when your world is balanced just enough to avoid shaking. That's the joke of it all. The right person rarely arrives wrapped in softness. They come with the kind of presence that rattles your bones a little. They make you feel things you weren't prepared to admit still existed inside you. They push you toward parts of yourself you'd rather not explore. Not because they're trying to fix you or break you, but simply because their existence disrupts the numbness you've been hiding behind. And deep down, you know it. You can feel it, like a hand pressing lightly against your chest, urging you to step forward instead of crawling back into the shadows you've gotten so good at living in. The truth is, when someone shakes your comfort, it's not a mistake. It's not an accident. It's an invitation. A very uncomfortable one, sure, but still an invitation. It's life asking whether you want connection or convenience, whether you want truth or routine, whether you want someone who challenges your patterns or someone who lets you rot inside them. Most people pick the easy option, the one that lets them feel safe and numb, instead of alive and vulnerable. But every once in a while you meet a person who doesn't let you pretend. Someone who sees right through your carefully built layers. Someone who doesn't get fooled by your calm voice, or your controlled expressions, or your quiet little lies about how you're fine. This person looks at you and something inside you feels exposed, not in a humiliating way, but in a way that says, finally, someone sees what I've been hiding from myself. It's unnerving, isn't it? Being seen, really seen. Most of your life you've been performing, shaping yourself into versions that keep you safe, agreeable, untouched. But with this person, the performance glitches, cracks, falls apart. They trigger your realness, and realness is messy. Realness forces you to confront your fears, your patterns, your wounds, your desires. It forces you to admit the things you'd rather bury under noise and distraction. And here's the twist. The ones worth holding on to are exactly the ones who bring that discomfort. They don't tiptoe around your wounds. They don't let you stay small. They don't let you sink into the same old habits that keep you isolated and numb. They poke at the parts of you that ache. They ask questions you don't want to answer. They create a tension that feels like pressure, but it's the kind of pressure diamonds come from. And deep down, even if you resist, even if you push back, even if you pretend you don't care, something inside you knows you need that tension. That without it, you'd stay stuck in the same stagnant pool you've been drowning in for years. But comfort is addictive. It whispers to you, telling you that it's safer to let go, safer to stay the same, safer to avoid the person who challenges your numbness. That whisper grows louder when your heart starts to react, when your emotions surge in directions you can't control. That's when most people choose escape. They walk away not because the connection is wrong, but because the connection is too right, too intense, too revealing. It scares them, it exposes them, it shows them what they could be if they stopped running. But here's the interesting part, the strongest con. Shins don't care about your fear. They don't vanish just because you try to pretend they're insignificant. They linger, they echo, They return in dreams, in memories, in unexpected moments. They tug at you when you think you've finally escaped. They remind you again and again that some people aren't meant to let you stay comfortable. They're meant to make you grow. They're meant to push you deeper into yourself. They're meant to wake you up from the safe little sleep you've been living in. Clarity is a funny thing. People say they want it, they beg for signs, they pray for answers. But the moment clarity actually arrives, they squint like it's too bright, too sharp, too revealing. They'd rather live in a comfortable fog, stumbling around with their eyes half closed, pretending they don't know what they already know. Because once clarity shows up, really shows up, you can't plead ignorance anymore. You can't keep playing pretend. And suddenly the truth you've been dodging becomes impossible to unsee. That's when people panic. That's when they start calling their own instincts confusion and their own intuition overthinking, just to avoid admitting that the universe has been handing them the answer on a silver platter. And that's the trick of it. When signs keep aligning around one person, when patterns repeat with a suspicious level of precision, when coincidences start stacking up like some cosmic wink, it's not madness, it's clarity. Pure, uncomfortable, undeniable clarity. The kind that doesn't knock politely. It kicks the door open, walks in, and sits across from you like, well, still going to pretend you don't see it? But people hate being exposed, even to themselves. So they squirm, they rationalize, they bury the very truth they asked to receive. Funny, isn't it? How someone can spend nights questioning, wondering, replaying conversations, dissecting memo. Rees, desperate for answers, only to reject them when they finally appear. Because clarity isn't always gentle. Sometimes it feels like a spotlight on your chest, highlighting every emotion you tried to downplay. Sometimes it feels like being caught red-handed by your own heart, and admitting the truth means admitting you felt something real, something you didn't plan for, didn't control, didn't expect. Realness terrifies people more than chaos ever could. But clarity, it doesn't vanish just because you look away. It lingers, it waits, it sharpens itself in the dark, and every time you try to deny it, it grows louder, heavier, more persistent. You begin to notice patterns you dismissed before. A familiar pull when you hear their name, a strange ache when you think of them, a sense of recognition that you can't logically explain. It's like the universe keeps tapping your shoulder, whispering, look, look again, and whether you admit it or not, you feel that little jolt in your chest every single time. You can try to tell yourself it's coincidence, that life is random, that you're imagining the repetition. But deep down, beneath all your excuses, you know when something is too deliberate to ignore. You know when someone's presence keeps resurfacing because there's unfinished meaning behind it. You know when clarity is trying, desperately, to get your attention. And you know when resisting, it starts to feel like lying to yourself with a straight face. What makes this clarity so hard to swallow is that it exposes your emotional fingerprints. You realize that this one person affects you in a way no one else does. They move something in you, unlock something you didn't show anyone. They stir up emotions you thought were dead, reactions you thought you'd buried, parts of yourself you didn't want anyone to see. Clarity forces you to admit that their impact wasn't temporary. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't shallow. It stayed. It lingered. It rooted itself somewhere you can't reach with denial alone. And maybe the scariest part is how clarity makes everything else look dull. You start noticing how other connections feel forced or faint in comparison. You notice how conversations lack the spark, how interactions lack the depth, how nothing quite hits the way it did with this one person. Not because you're obsessed, not because you're desperate, but because some bonds simply stand out. They carry a different weight. They leave a different mark. They have a way of echoing inside you long after the moment has passed. That's the kind of clarity life sends when it wants you to pay attention. Not the soft, maybe kind, but the relentless, repeating, impossible to ignore kind. The kind you feel in your chest before you understand it in your mind. The kind that loops back around until you acknowledge it. And the funniest part? The moment you stop fighting it, even for a second, everything starts making sense. The signs, the timing, the coincidences, the strange familiarity, the pull that wouldn't go away. All of it starts to align like pieces of a puzzle you pretended you weren't assembling. Clarity doesn't show up to scare you. It shows up to wake you, to remind you that some truths don't disappear just because you're not ready, and some people don't cross your path over and over without a reason. Resistance is a funny creature. It dresses itself up in logic, in caution, in that calm little voice that says, no, this can't be real. You're exaggerating. You're imagining things. It pretends to protect you, to keep you grounded, safe, controlled. But what it's actually doing is choking the truth right in front of you. Because when something is undeniable, when a connection is too strong, too familiar, too persistent, your mind starts scrambling, desperate to regain control. And that's when resistance slips in like a sly little shadow, whispering excuses, warnings, distractions, anything that keeps you from acknowledging what your heart already knows. At first, resistance feels responsible, sensible. It tells you to slow down, think rationally, question everything. Not because it cares about truth, but because it cares about keeping you comfortable. It knows that admitting the truth means admitting vulnerability. It means admitting attachment. It means admitting that someone out there has the power to move you in ways you can't fully explain. And nothing terrifies a guarded heart more than realizing someone else has that kind of influence. But the funny thing about the truth is, it doesn't stay quiet just because you tell it to. It leaks through the cracks. It shows up in the way your chest tightens when you think of them, in the way your voice softens when you talk about them, in the way your mind drifts back to moments you